Hey, blessings to you all this Sunday morning. I'm recording today from the downstairs office in our house as the rain beating on the roof lights upstairs is so loud it sounds like somebody's throwing pebbles. Sounds like a miniature stoning. Anyhow, I always try to bring you a new way to look at things. Sometimes I draw criticism online from various people who feel that they need to correct my perspective because in their view it does not follow the rules of biblical literalism. And I think, to be honest, biblical literalism has been one of the worst curses of the, let's call it the evangelical message. And through it and in it, it has created a scenario where understanding the divine and the presence of the divine, that we would use the term God, becomes extremely restricted because we are then only allowed by those criteria to define God within the context of some words within a book, which in their own right have passed through many minds and many mouths and many translators and many centuries, and that literalism then, I feel and believe, does two things. First of all, it shrinks something that should be much bigger, expansive, and encompassing, and it also narrows our ability to unwrap and unfold and explain the full nuances of these ancient writings, which contain, in my view, incredible wisdom and insight. And so anyway, if I were to say to you, because I want to talk a little bit about on the Christmas context today, if I were to say to you, finish the line of the Christmas carol for me, we three. Of course, you probably bear in mind and bring to your mind the Christmas carol, "We Three Kings of Orient Are." And the truth is that is not a true expression of what that carol should say. If you're going to be accurate, truly accurate, you would have to make the carol "We Three Persian, Zoroastrian Astrologers of Orient Are." But of course that does not help the rhyming of the song. As the old comedy duo Smith and Jones, Mel Smith and Griff Rhys-Jones, used to say in the time when Nelson Mandela had been released from prison, the problem with Nelson Mandela being set free from prison, it reduced a swear word, "good song," because that was the time when the song was going around, "Free Nelson Mandela." Well, of course, if he was free, the song became pretty pointless. But anyway, in that context, what I'm saying is that if you were to put in "We Three Persian Zoroastrian Astrologers," you would ruin the song. Some of you might think that song needs ruining. The truth about the matter is that these visitors, real or imagined, however you wish to perceive it, were certainly not kings. They are defined as wise men in some translations. Well, maybe. If you take some of your theology from Monty Python's The Life of Brian, then you will remember the wise men there turning up at the wrong place rather than the house of Jesus. They turn up at the house of Brian, which is, that whole movie is about the confusion, and I think it's hilarious. Not sure about the crucifixion scene, but I think the concept of it is hilarious, of how easy it is for us to be drawn to something that looks like kind of what we were after, but we get down the wrong track, so we become followers of Brian instead of followers of Jesus. And I think some people's understanding of the gospel is more akin to Life of Brian than it is the life of Jesus. But there you go, it's another story. Anyhow, in the story, the wise men turn up and frighten Brian's mother half to death. And they declare themselves, we are the wise men. Well, her response is, well, you're not very wise, are you, sneaking up on an old lady like that? Wise men, maybe, but using these words is, wise men, kings, is both unhelpful and misleading in respect to a proper understanding of what is being conveyed by their inclusion. What makes it worse is the thought that this may have been done deliberately. Now, again, there's something for you to wrestle with, and that will probably draw an email or two in regards to that one comment. But I don't know, you see, I think so often these things are translated in a way that misleads us from the fullness of what we need to learn. Now, I would also say that I think one has to be really callously hard, it's my opinion, to not love the idea of the Christmas story. I mean, it's just a gorgeous story. I think it has enduring resonance, if for nothing else, because it's just a beautiful story that we have connected to in a way that is obviously, along with the emergence of what we would know as the Christian faith, has become a staple of Western society. But I think there's a subtle cleverness within the biblical text that using cultural awareness of the time written about conveys a hopeful, inclusive, big-hearted message in a call to believe. See, that's why I think it has this attraction. When you look at the characters on stage during the epic event that we call the Nativity, it's very interesting because each one of these in its own right has a message attached to it. You have a Roman imperial governor setting the scene for the birth of an anti-empirical message, which is, where's the paradox in that? The whole census thing. Real or unreal, some people would say, well, historically we have no record of a census taking place at that time. That's not the point. The point is that the inclusion of this in the story, I think, probably was real, and there are other arguments to say it was historically real, but the inclusion is because it's trying to say something in the context of this Roman empirical governor setting a scene for the birth of an anti-empirical message. And then, of course, we've got the angelic messengers appearing to the shepherds. Now, depending on what documents you read about the shepherds, there's definitely an implication that the message of this thing, the initial expression of the reality of this thing is brought to a group of people who one would say were not the most qualified to receive that message. If this is a heaven-based message, if this is a God message, they were not the ones you would choose to bring that message to. But here, they are the first to receive this message. And then you've got an unknown, immature virgin girl getting chosen to be the recipient of this thing. And I don't mean that as a derogatory term of non-recognition of the importance of what was about to happen, but she becomes the recipient of this thing, this incarnation, this becoming, and she's just an unknown, immature virgin girl. And then you've got a guy who's a carpenter who barely gets mentioned again, Joseph, who, according to the Message version of the Bible, I love this phrase, I've preached on this many times, was chagrined but noble. Now that's an old English word, chagrined. What it really means in our vernacular today is that this guy who was wrestling with the reality, truth, acceptance, application, involvement, impartation of this thing, was pretty ticked. Which you would be, wouldn't you? He was pretty ticked, but he was noble in that in spite of all the challenges, he rose to the challenge to accommodate the coming of this thing, to accommodate the impending presence of this that we would know in Christian understanding of God incarnate, the incarnation. And then you've got an unscrupulous ruler, Herod, who would rather kill babies than wrestle with the change demanded by a new revelation of truth. See, each one of these carries within it, from its cultural essence, a blatant message just from this one story. And then, of course, you move on to what I want to talk a little bit about today, and Persian Zoroastrian astrologers. Now, if you don't know what Zoroastrian was, Zoroastrianism was the religion, the dominant religion in Persia. And of course, the Israelites were in captivity in Persia for a long time. And if you take the time to investigate, study, research Zoroastrianism, you will find, I hope this doesn't upset some, but you will find that what was drawn into the Israelite culture, that it then of course has moved through many of those things to our Christian understanding, were elements that were not based in Hebrew belief or understanding of God, but were cross-cultural absorption of ideas from Zoroastrianism. So even some issues like heaven and hell and the devil and those kind of ideas, if you look, you will find a lot of the root for what we think we understand of that actually came from Persian Zoroastrianism. Anyway, that's not my subject today, but you can go and Google it and have a good look into that. These character of these Persian Zoroastrian astrologers who were prepared to undertake a 2-year expedition on the strength of a horoscope. Now, a couple of things to point out here. They were not Persian astronomers studying the cosmos from a scientific perspective, although I have no doubt that because of the cross connection of disciplines back in that era, that they are called wise men, not just because of any outward wisdom, but because they were also likely to have had some scientific understanding, some scientific grasp. But there was not a distinction back then between what we would know as astronomy and what we would know as astrology. You know, one studying the course of the heavens and the content of the heavens, the other one the study of how the alignment of stars and how the movement in the heavens affects life in earth. Now, if you take that in the broader sense, you know, who would deny that, who has any kind of faith-based understanding or Christian understanding that what's happening in the heavens affects what's happening in the earth? Now, they understood that in the sense of their astrology. They believed that the movement of the stars and the things that they saw were prophetic, were symbolic, were influential in the process of life. So they're Persian, they're Zoroastrian in the context of their belief. They're astrologers, not specifically astronomers. And on the strength of a horoscope reading, we have seen his star in the east, and I've come to worship him. That's not just about astronomy. That's like, this star means something. On the strength of a horoscope, these Persian Zoroastrian astrologers undertook a 2-year expedition. Now, the whole idea of, the wise men turning up at the stable, the manger, is pretty much a nonsense, because if you read the story, they didn't come to a manger. When they finally arrived in the story, they arrive at the house, and they've been to see Herod, and they've probably done a journey that took them via Bethlehem, because it clearly says that when they came to the house, and it talks about the child, not the baby. And of course, Herod's response to their horoscopical declaration of seeing the star, and when they first saw it, and that present day meant that Herod instructed that all babies under 2 years of age and up to 2 years of age should be killed. Monstrous. But that would also indicate to you that they first saw the star 2 years earlier, and I don't think that was 2 years before the birth of Jesus. I think this was leading them to the home of the child. So then you move on to, in the story, why a manger? Why is this the setting? Why an obscure village in the countryside, Bethlehem? Why a census at that time? And what about the star? All of these things become elements on the stage of this wonderful story. So considering all that and all that's weaved into the story, how do we unlock its twists and turns and secrets to bring us a life-defining moment that will keep unfolding for us for as long as we can imagine? Because I personally do not believe that what happened back then was meant to be just an event, a historical event and a marker point. I think it is the introduction to a process that will keep unfolding for as long as you can imagine. See, the major point of the story is not nativity, but incarnation. Now, we've got taken up too much with the nativity aspect. Okay, the nativity is simply the Christmas story. Okay, rather than the incarnational aspect. When you move from nativity to incarnation, it ceases to be a ceremony or a celebration within the context of the calendar, and it becomes a revelation of an impartation to determine a lifestyle of incarnation. God in us, God with us, God as us. And I believe that's the root and context from which all biblical scripture should be expounded, and by which we should begin our little journey with broadened minds to understand God, to understand the divine. So it's not about nativity, it's about incarnation. Okay, incarnation, God in us, God with us, God as us. Now, within the bigger story, excuse me a minute, within the bigger story, I want to focus on this one element that I think is of shatteringly vital importance if you want to grasp the revolutionary nature of the Jesus message. Let me just read this bit of story from Matthew chapter 2. You'll be familiar with this. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. There's the other word that's used. And asked, "Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had called together all the people, chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child, and as soon as you find him, report to me so that I may go and worship him." Liar. Drama. After they'd heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they'd seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child and his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. And they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which is how I understood it as a kid. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route, because he basically was going to kill all the kids under 2. That's the story. So we're also introduced to this term Magi. Why Magi? It's a legitimate term from the era if you look it up, particularly about these Zoroastrian wise men astrologers. It's the word from which we get our word magic. Magi, magic. That's the origination. These were magic men. These were magicians, considered to be magicians. So not only are they declared really as astrologers because of how they see the star, and these Zoroastrians are also looked upon as magicians. All kinds of stuff that in institutionalized traditional Christianity would be disqualifying factors, each one in their own right, for the purists particularly, of allowing these men to be so significant in the story of the purity of Jesus born in a manger, the Christ, the Word becoming flesh. You know, why were these people in this story? Why not choose some, you know, amazingly self-righteous, holy, whatever, you know, but these guys are in. Now this is what fascinates me, you see, that they should play such a major role in the declaration and recognition and gifting towards the incarnation, that the empowerment for much of what was to come from the gifts that they brought: gold, frankincense and myrrh, each one of them extremely valuable. One could argue that these Persian Zoroastrian astrologers, who would have been rejected by the mainstream church for all of that and their association with magic, strange arts, were the ones who financed the ministry and all that was to come. Anyhow, so for me, it would appear that a bunch of Persian astrologers were more tuned in to what was happening at the time of God being made flesh than the whole religious community, who were the ones seeking it out, seeking him out, seeking this out. It wasn't the Bible bashers, the theologians, the law preachers, the megachurch pastors, the whatever. It was these Persian Zoroastrian astrologers looking for this incarnation of God in the revelation of the Christ, not the religious community. And they were the ones prepared to make the journey to find truth. If these guys in that story, these so informed leaders of the belief community, faith community, was so inspirational, why is it that when they only had to go, in essence, if what they were reading was true, occasionally in the story, from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, but they weren't going to do that? No, they were in their high tower, they were sat in their little rooms studying their scriptures, thinking that by knowing them they were something, when all the way from Persia comes these Zoroastrian astrologers, who are magic men, who were the ones prepared to make the journey to find truth. You see, we can be so restrictive in the search for truth that we think it's a certain kind of person who we have defined and delineated by a narrow, restrictive understanding of God, the divine, spirituality, scripture, and that those who we think would be excluded from being primary receptors and understanders, going all the way from shepherds through the Virgin Girl, through Joseph, through these magi, they were the ones who actually had got a handle on where it was happening. I'm not a big fan of what Christianity has become, because I think it's institutionalization, which being confirmed by certain things like, if it's big, it must be right kind of thing, is a little troublesome. And I think this whole story, this nativity story, which is actually about incarnation, is actually a propaganda message against that way of trying to box God up in our small-minded but big ambitious projects, and missing then where the truth is found, who the truth is found by, and how the truth is found, and one could argue why the truth is found. So suddenly with just this one detail of these magi, we've opened up a whole world of wonder in respect to who has the handle on what's going on. It seems to me that religious people have an aversion to their truth being questioned or challenged. You don't need to spend 5 minutes, more than 5 minutes, looking at controversy within those who have a wider understanding of the Christian faith, the understanding of the gospel of Jesus, of God, of history, to find that religious people just have an aversion to their truth being questioned or challenged. And we should actually be, or we or they should actually be the ones who have the openness, because we understand the process of incarnation. Into where we are comes something new, something fresh. That is a revelation of the divine for us, that is the formation and formulator of our journey from that point on. But we seem to have an aversion to our truth being questioned or challenged. See, there also seems to be in this a lot of journeys embedded in the story, which again speaks to me very strongly. There's the journey of Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem. There's the journey of Joseph from doubt to belief. There's the journey of Mary from conception to birth. There's the journey of the shepherds from mountain to manger. There's the journey of the Magi from Persia to the house. And there's the journey of Mary and Joseph to Egypt and back after the baby is born. Listen, don't be afraid of or resistant to the journey that brings you to truth. Because it could be as varied and as diverse as the ones in this story. Don't be afraid or resistant of it, but we become so afraid because obviously any journey requires that you leave where you are to go somewhere that you are not. And you often have to leave in faith that where you are going will hold in within its boundaries what it was that you left to find. Now, not that that should be the end of the journey, because in essence, I believe, even the words of Jesus, what he kept saying to people was, follow me. He didn't say, follow me to there. He said, follow me and I'll make you. Something about the issue of even the message of Jesus that's not always, I think, being conveyed correctly, is that he brings us not to a destinational theology, i.e. come from here to there, earth to heaven, whatever, but a directional theology. Just go the way that I'm going. And that, for me, is the essence of true spirituality anyway. So don't be afraid of or resistant to the journey that brings you to truth. Every one of us should share the hope that the virgin birth is a reality. Now, whether we believe or whether you believe it is the story has been molded, whether some of you believe that the words used don't mean virgin. I've heard all the different theological concepts about this. Excuse me. I'm not particularly uncomfortable. In fact, I would say I'm very comfortable with the idea of the virgin birth. It doesn't bother me. I can see the reality of it. I believe the truth of it. I believe the mystery of it. And I think, why not? The world and the universe and science is a very exciting place with many mysteries and wonders. So why not? I believe it personally. But the reason I say every one of us should share the hope that the virgin birth is reality is for this reason, because if it is, then it's possible that by very non-human means, something very humanly impacting can happen to the least of us. And I think this is the essence of the story of the incarnation. I think within there, the great response of Mary in the story to the invitation to become the mother of Jesus. I think the great response of Mary to that invitation within the story as it's written is to become a participant, not a spectator. So the great response of Mary to the invitation to become a participant over a spectator is found in the words that she responded to the angelic visitation, that she says, well, let it be to me as you have said. Does be it unto me as you have said still work? Is there something powerful about that releases something mystically, supernaturally, spiritually, powerfully? Having that attitude, not just speaking those words, but having that heart attitude that says, let it be to me as you have said. Does it still work? Well, try it and see. Try it and see. If there's a divine presence, if there is an incarnation for us, then try it and see. See, I think there's something about surrender to mystery and unknowing that carries a potential for unimagined possibility. And I want to draw you today to the place of surrender to mystery and unknowing, realizing that this story encompasses so many ways and so many people that are all being drawn to and brought to this power of incarnation. Right? Word made flesh, God in us, with us, as us. Something coming on the inside of us that was not there before this encounter, and that when it has its birth from us becomes an expression, the expression of God in the earth, God in us, God through us, God with us, all of that. And that's what I want you to experience today, by understanding this is not actually this story particularly and per se and only about nativity, but it's about incarnation. And that is the journey that our inner being always calls for, is that power and presence of incarnation. There's something about surrender to mystery and unknowing. And some of you have been in church for years, listen to me. There's something about the surrender to mystery and unknowing. That's why we've got these characters thrown in there. There's something about surrender to mystery and unknowing that carries a potential for unimagined possibility. May you be blessed this Christmas time with the manifestation of unimagined possibility because of the incarnation in the Christ. I love you. I bless you. Look forward to seeing some of you this coming Saturday as we meet for a short time at 4 o'clock in Priory Street. Try and be there. Love to see you. God bless you. Love you. Have a wonderful day.